Hello, a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Coming up on this week's programme, Yemen's warring parties meet face to face. This as women seek a greater role at the decision-making table. We'll be joined by Yemeni activist Rasha Jarhoum to take a peek into how women and girls are the ones who are paying the price of the ongoing conflict. Nadia Murad, from an Islamic State group captive to a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Now she's making a plea to the world to combat sexual violence as a weapon of war. Also coming up on this week's show, a piracy conflict in the Middle East. A Saudi Arabia-based bootleg network, that's BeOutQ, is stealing the world's most valuable sports content as well as TV programming from the likes of the BBC. Thank you for watching. We start this week's programme with negotiations taking place in Sweden aimed at trying to end the devastating conflict in Yemen. In what's been seen as a positive step, the warring parties, that's the Yemeni government and the Houthi rebels, held their first face-to-face talks over a planned prisoner exchange. According to observers, however, the main hurdles are still very much in place. They include the reopening of Sana'a airport, as well as an immediate ceasefire around the strategic port city of Hodeidah. The United Nations, for its part, has announced it is seeking $4 billion to provide humanitarian aid to the world's poorest Arab nation. Now, here's France 24's Anka Ula bringing us the stories of a number of prisoners, many of them having suffered extreme torture.
This is my hand. It was fractured. And these are bruises, and these lines are marks from beatings with electric wires.
This man has trouble speaking about the torture he suffered at the hands of Yemen's Houthi rebels. According to an investigation by the Associated Press, he's one of thousands of people who have been imprisoned or tortured by members of the militia over the past 4 years. This former activist lost the use of his legs after he was kidnapped in Sana'a in 2015.
They took me and hung me with handcuffs from the ceiling. They left me with only the tips of my toes touching the ground. I think this is the worst kind of torture. They also electrocuted me, but that was bearable. Even death is better than hanging like that.
But torture isn't a tool used solely by Houthis. The AP and Amnesty International found that it's also practiced by Yemeni forces, operating outside the command of their own government. It's also used in a network of secret prisons run by the United Arab Emirates, which is part of the Saudi-led coalition fighting in Yemen.
I stayed there about 177 days without any sort of true investigation into me. They questioned me after 10 days and that was it. But during these 177 days, there were blows, insults, humiliation, and the torture was done by an Emirati man they called the Doctor.
According to Amnesty International, arbitrary arrests or forced disappearances, which are often accompanied by torture, are committed under the guise of the fight against terror.
Although the UAE-backed security forces have claimed these arrests and subsequent detentions are mostly linked to counter-terrorism operations, many arrests appear to be based on unfounded suspicions and personal vendettas.
Amnesty International says these acts amount to war crimes. But it's just one facet of the war, which has killed 10,000 people since 2014. 15 million more are on the verge of famine.
Now, with the negotiations underway, Yemeni women have been demanding a seat at the table. They represent different political sensibilities, activists, development workers, and even civil society in Yemen. Now, one of the women at the helm of this campaign is Rasha Jarhoum. She's a women's rights activist from Yemen. She's also the director of the Peace Track Initiative, and she joins us from Ottawa in Canada. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on Middle East Matters. How do you perceive these negotiations? Some observers are speaking of a so-called breakthrough, while others are saying not a great deal has been achieved.
Frankly, with our experience in Yemen and in the last few years, we didn't have successful peace processes so far. And also comparing to what is happening in the region, However, we're trying to be hopeful. We were hoping that, for example, some of the points that we raised about releasing the detainees before, as confidence-building measures, before even the parties meet in Sweden happened, but it didn't happen. Still, this topic is being discussed, which is a good sign. We were hoping that women will be included in the main delegations, but however, we had only one woman present, and this is something that we have been calling so strongly. And we are hoping that the UN envoy will find a way to include women in the peace talks, because the priorities and topics they are bringing are very important.
Rasha, you said one woman at the table in the negotiations in Yemen. What role did your organization play in the latest round?
We are not present physically, but we're supporting from afar. We have been advising the UN envoy's team on how to make this ceasefire agreements more responsive to women's rights. We are supporting the women who are participating on the sidelines of the talks currently. We have conducted a Twitter chat discussing the detainees issue and raising concerns of human rights defenders about, for example, the use of terminology of the prisoners of war, which is not the case. Or many of the detainees are not. They are just civilians, politicians. They are not combatants. So these are the issues that we are trying to support currently.
Now, Rasha, there have been reports suggesting that women are the ones who are paying the price of Yemen's war. What's your assessment here?
This is very valid. I mean, Yemen, even before the war, was a hostile country towards women's rights. There was violence against women embedded in the laws, in institutions, and social norms. Guardianship rules. So with the war, everything has magnified. Women who want to travel for medical evacuation are not able because they seek the permission of their guardians. Women are more prone to famine because they eat last. This is normally what happens in Yemen. Women are more prone to diseases such as cholera because they are caregivers. Women are walking for long distances in besieged areas to try to feed their families and bring the basic life necessities. But it is important for us not to see women as passive victims, but to see their strength and resilience trying to address all of these issues.
Rasha Jarhoum, the co-founder of the Peace Track Initiative, saying women are often the last to eat. Thank you so much for your time. Turning our attention to the Nobel Peace Prize, which has been awarded to Nadia Murad and Dr. Denis Mukwege for their efforts to stop rape and sexual violence being used as weapons of war. Murad was among thousands of Yazidi women who were taken hostage and held as sex slaves when the Islamic State group swept into Iraq. Her mother and 6 brothers are still missing.
Thank you very much for this honor. But the fact remains that the only prize in the world that can restore our dignity is justice and the prosecution of criminals. There is no award that can compensate for our people and our loved ones who were killed solely because they were Yazidis. The only prize that will restore a normal life between our people and our friends is justice and protection for the rest of the community.
Now to Time Magazine's Person of the Year, which is presented to an individual or a group who have made an impact for better or for worse during the past year. And in 2018, a group of journalists whose work has landed them in prison or cost them their lives have been honoured. Among them, Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi commentator who's believed to have been murdered on the orders of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for speaking out against the ultra-conservative kingdom. The other contenders this year included families separated at the US border, Vladimir Putin and Meghan Markle. We end this week's show with a close look at BeOutQ, a widespread piracy operation based in Saudi Arabia. The network, which provides coverage of major tennis and football tournaments as well as TV programming, is reported to be stealing the signal of beIN Media Group, a Qatar-based sports network, as well as the BBC and NBC, among others, and broadcasting it as its own. This is the result of a diplomatic feud in the Middle East that has seen several nations cut trade ties with Qatar over the country's alleged support of terrorism.
It's the Champions League, and all televisions in the Middle East are tuned to European football. They should be showing beIN Sports, who hold the rights to the competition, but in this Beirut cafe, customers are watching beOutQ, a pirate network issued from Saudi Arabia. The boss has access to nearly 4,000 channels worldwide after getting this simple decoder worth around $100.
I have a brother in Saudi Arabia. He's the one who sent me this box. We can watch all the matches, all the sports.
Those affected by this hijack blame the Saudi government. This industrial-scale piracy is connected to the embargo imposed on Qatar by Saudi Arabia and its allies. beIN Sports is the main target. It's one of the largest sports packages on the planet, and it's owned by the Qataris. We've been given access behind the scenes to take a look at their dedicated anti-piracy control room.
A few second delay, beIN, beOutQ, and on this screen here, this is beIN 2 and beOutQ2.
Through a Saudi satellite, beOutQ retransmits the 10 encrypted channels of the group almost simultaneously and affixes its own logo, a rare move for pirate stations.
Normally pirates aren't bothered about whose content it is and creating their own brand. They'll just steal the brand and stream it. beOutQ are bothered about commercialising their piracy. They're selling advertising rates, they're selling subscriptions, so it's important that they put their brand there, which is very unusual, and that's their brand.
beIN holds $15 billion worth of sports rights and has invested heavily in its infrastructure. Apart from the drop in profits, the Qatari group says this type of hacking threatens media business all around the world.
People see this dispute as Qatar against Saudi Arabia. It's not that at all. This is a global issue. Our rights are being pirated, other broadcasters' rights are being pirated. That completely undermines the economic engine of the sports and entertainment industry.
Qatar has filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization on behalf of beIN, which has also claimed $1 billion in damages.
Well, that's it for us this week. Thank you for watching.